Today on the Worship Anywhere broadcast, we're going to talk about setting goals in a totally different way. We oftentimes set goals for personal achievement. Today we're going to talk about a very different way of setting goals that transforms our ability to love. Thanks for joining us. I'm Pastor Matt, and this is the Worship Anywhere broadcast. Before we do anything else, let's do some darn good together. Check in for charity. This is our last week to do this particular charity, Souls for Souls. We're checking in on social media at Surprise Church Bismarck on Facebook. And every check-in helps us provide warm coats for kids in need. You can use the hashtag for warm coats and then click on it to see all the other churches that are pooling together to send thousands of coats to thousands of kids. So thanks so much for your help doing good. Follow the prompts below to get involved, take a step forward. And one thing we're doing, especially as you look at the text prompt, one of them is forgiving. We're doing a special emphasis until the end of January, where if you want to support some of the great things we're doing at Surprise, either in the city of Bismarck or in the many cities that we're beginning to reach outside of Bismarck, whether it's Mandan, Lincoln, Washburn, the Twin Cities, and elsewhere, we'd love your help fueling our mission locally and globally. And that would be, for some people, that'd be new. So we're making it worth your while. You want to try giving for the first time. Number one, you're going to see how it changes your connection to what God's doing in the world and your connection to Surprise. But also it's going to change something because we want to invest in you. We don't just take donations from people. We invest in people who are investing in our mission at Surprise. And so we have a 6 weeks on money course. It's a fantastic financial management course that really has blessed a lot of people. We want to share that with you, and we'll comp that course. It's an $80 course. We'll give it to you for free just to say thanks for giving your first time gift, even if it's $1. We'll give you this $80 course because we just want to invest in you. So thanks for your help in fueling our mission and allowing us to partner with you. Here's an oxymoron. You know what an oxymoron is? An oxymoron is something that contradicts itself, right? One person team. There's no such thing, right? Like a team is meant to be a combination of differently gifted people, different sized people, different people with different capacities so that they can together accomplish a goal or win a game. And so if there's no sport where there's a one-person team. There's sports where there are individual competitors, but they're called competitors. They're not teams. And I mean, if you think about it, there's no sport that would say, what team are you on? Oh, I'm on that team that only has one person on it. I'm certainly like if a basketball team, everybody's sick, puking in the locker room, and only one guy can come out and play, or two guys. I guess our baseball team has a bunch of people not show up. You can play with less people, but there's no sport that actually scripts it that way. Well, I changed my mind. There's one sport that's weird. It's hockey. Hockey is the only sport I'm aware of where people get put in punished, put in timeout. I mean, I think hockey people are a little weird. God bless you. I think Jesus still died for you, but I think you're a little weird if you love hockey. It's just, I never grew up with it, and it's just, I think it's an odd sport. You go out on the ice and you play a sport. I don't get it. However, hockey is the only sport that actually plans there to be different numbers of people on different teams. Here's a picture of a team with like two guys out on a power play, which means when you have 5 hockey players out there, and this is the extent of my hockey knowledge, and somebody gets put in the naughty box, the penalty box, the timeout box, and then somebody else gets put in the penalty box on the other team, you can actually play against less and less people. Theoretically, you could play against one person or even no people, I suppose, at some point if they just keep being naughty. Hockey's the only sport that does that I'm aware of. It doesn't really apply to any other sport. But the reality is, a one-person team is an oxymoron. It doesn't even make sense. So let me ask you about goals with that in mind. Ask yourself, do I set personal achievement goals only? Like I'm a one-person team. When you think about your life playing out, do you think, man, I want to be something. I hope I grow up and be something. Or I'm in my midlife and I want to make some changes and get some things in order. Or, you know what, I'm in this last chapter of my life. I want to sort through this or that and finish strong. Is there any other kind of goal other than personal achievement? Is there any other kind of goal that you and I can set that has to do with something broader than me improving in some way, shape, or form, or experiencing something individually? I want to take you back to the early church, because here we see a very different sort of priority in place in which they prayed toward goals that were not personal achievement goals. Nothing wrong with personal achievement. I'm big on personal achievement, but there's something more than that. The first Christians built a church that was built on a foundation of intentional spiritual relationships. So the first thing that Christians started to do was not create a master plan with scripted goals and like build a building, create the Bible, print the Bible, market the Bible, send it all over the world, send missionaries all over the world. They did all those things later. I'm not saying they don't matter, but the first thing they did was start forming relationships. Watch this. This is when the church was born effectively in Acts chapter 2. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. The underlined words here are kind of what they devoted themselves to: teaching about Jesus, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together. They just had a group of people experience God's power and grow significantly in a short period of time. So they were getting together in homes here. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had a need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. That's kind of a public space in their city. And then they broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Now that's a really remarkable and critical passage of Scripture. I mean, I'm not saying any other passage isn't important, but this passage gives us an inside look at what the first Christians decided to do when 3,000 people joined after a powerful day of God's miracles and a powerful speech that convicted them of sin and pointed them to Jesus as a solution to be their leader and forgiver. They just like, we're in, and 3,000 people, and then they figure out, what do we do with these people? What goals should we set? And this is what they started doing. Here's a quick summary of what they did. They practiced some intentional rhythms of gathering kind of publicly for worship like we do on Sundays, but then prioritizing home-based gatherings in which they would talk about Jesus' teaching. They didn't have Bibles. They just told the stories that he told and told stories about him. And then they shared meals, very important to Jesus, and his disciples were sharing meals together, and the early church just carried that rhythm into their everyday life, and praying together. So in public, like we talked about last week, prayer in community is very, very much as important as praying by yourself, and maybe even more important. Sharing meals together, talking about Jesus together, gathering together in our homes. Those rhythms led to personal growth. It says that they practiced radical generosity. If people had a need, people look, oh, what can I sell? Oh, I got that old pair of stilettos I haven't worn in a long time. My stilettos are really worn out. I haven't worn them since... So those sorts of things I'm just going to sell because I want to help you. I want to do what they just thought that way towards one another. Not because they just like, boom, I'm generous, but it was the product of those rhythms in community. It changed them. They grew personally, and they were joyful. It says they had glad and sincere hearts. They weren't sitting there, and some church people get like this, and it just blows me away when I meet somebody that goes to a church that's like grumpy and bitter about getting up early on a Sunday instead of golfing, or I greet at the door, or I do this on the team thing, and I help out or I give, and I'm bitter and grumpy. Like, don't do it then. This is only meant for glad and sincere hearts. You don't fit the profile of someone who belongs in a role of serving Jesus if you can't do it in joy, because it's meant to be the overflow of absolute joy. Like, I cannot believe he lets me do this, right? And so their intentional rhythms are the foundation to their growing and producing something. They didn't set the goals to produce. It came out of those communal rhythms that they enjoyed. And that led to the wonderful results. It said profound results like signs and wonders. People were getting saved and healed left and right. mean, they're praying for people and God's doing miracles. That still happens. Um, I saw it happen in the last couple months where I saw one believer pray for another, and that believer went to the doctor. The doctor said, "You're better." Doesn't always happen, and it's up to God when it does and doesn't, but we believe that he can and will sometimes when we ask. And they were the other results. They lived a life of praise and worship. They lived a life of enjoying favor in the community. They blessed their community, and their community was thankful for them. They had daily growth, personally, but also numerically. It said God added to the number daily those who were being saved. People's lives were changing around this community because they were also joining this community. And ultimately, the world was changed. The entire world had been, over the centuries, flooded with believers living like this. So take a look at the spiritual growth assessment categories, all laid out here on this slide. We're on February 6th, we'll be unleashing or revealing or sharing this new tool that we're creating that's going to help you identify where you are in these 5 areas: your identity in Christ, your embodiment, your engagement with Scripture, your prayer life. Today, the message about spiritual community, that your spiritual faith relationships, and then your sense of mission, your participation in God's mission. Our goal is to build, as we've been talking about, fluency through intentionality in each of these areas. And that means that someone who's taking the inventory and gets to this question, where are you at in terms of your spiritual relationships? If a person is just open to spiritual relationships, they'll say, I'm interested, I'm open, I'm not opposed to it, I don't have it. I don't have people that I regularly talk with, pray with, that are there to support me spiritually or challenge me to grow or tell me what God's doing in their life and let me share some of the things that I think he's nudging me to consider and get their feedback. Like, some people just don't have that, but they're not opposed to it, okay? So you're already a 6 if you're just sitting here today saying, well, that sounds all right. I'd like to learn more about that, or maybe try it out, So you're past halfway, because if someone is a 5, they couldn't care less. They just don't care. If someone's a 4, they're actually against it. So if you're open, you're past halfway. God's already done a lot of work in your heart. Now, the next step would be to become active, to be like, you know what? I'm doing some things to engage in spiritual relationships. Some people just start going to worship on a Sunday, where they talk to people, or they get together in a group once in a while, and they start, doing some things to kind of share faith with people. But they just get started. There's no rhythm to it. They do it maybe when they feel like it, or they call an old friend to talk and pray, but it's more of an impulse-based rhythm. It's not intentional. So the next step for that person would be, let's get intentional. Let's make sure that I'm not leaving this up for chance. As I go through life and make major decisions and seasons change, I want to intentionally work to surround myself with people who cheer each other on for Jesus' sake and help each other live our lives and tell our stories with Jesus as the hero, so that we can have a place where it's safe to talk about Jesus, so that then we can go into places where it's less safe and do that as well. Oftentimes people are like, I don't know how to talk about my faith. And I'm like, well, do you talk about it with anybody that has faith as well? Well, not really. Well, there's your problem. Try to learn Spanish without talking to somebody that knows Spanish or that is trying to learn with you. And it's like, well, you don't get on a plane and parachute into Mexico and just say, well, let's see how my Spanish is. You practice where it's safe. And that leads you to become fluent. Again, using the language metaphor, you're more comfortable after you do it for a while in terms of spiritual relationships. And then the cool thing starts to happen. You start to want this for others because of the difference that it's made in your life. So it's amazing to watch our community groups where after they do it for a while, they start bringing friends and neighbors. Our men's group this week, somebody just brought a coworker who doesn't even go to church, but just is, he needs something. He's like, why don't you come with me to my group? So we just met him. We had a great time just connecting. He didn't have all the answers, and we didn't have all the answers, but it was a great start of building spiritual relationships. So the outcome goal that we have is to become overflowing, which itself is the beginning of a whole new chapter where we're able to help other people along this journey of finding a home in God's family through the foundation of spiritual relationships. So the goal is learning how to set goals that aren't just for the team of me, but are for relationship depth. If I set goals for relationships, do you realize what I've done? I've set goals that include other people that are bigger than just me and that allow me to be helping other people with their life goals and potential. So this is kind of a last call. If you're watching from a distance or if you're local to this area, we want to loop you into this 10-week wave of community groups because things are already starting to get started and people's lives are already starting to get enhanced. And we want you to be a part of that. So text this number if you'd like to be a part of either a group that is a virtual group that meets online. One of our groups had just kicked off virtually this week. It sounds like it was fantastic. If you'd like to start an in-person group where you live, we can train you and give you the tools for doing that, even if it's just a couple people. Or if you're wanting to engage with some of the groups that are close by in this particular region. This is kind of the last call because it's a 10-week window and we don't tend to add people at the end of that, but rather at the beginning to make sure they get a fuller experience. So this is a good time. You can visit our community groups page on our website, but the best way probably if you're watching is to just text the number groups in your message and then to the number 701-380-8210. We'll just give you some information, no commitment, but we want to help you to experience this kind of community. And right now I want to share a little bit of a story of Rhonda as she experienced community groups. I think you'll get a better sense of how this can enhance a person's life. So check out Rhonda's community group story.
I've been going to Surprise for, I was trying to figure it out, about 6 years, maybe, something, because it wasn't right at the beginning, and volunteering all along in one capacity or another. And so when the idea of joining a community group, I just didn't see the value in it, or I just didn't feel like I had the time to do it. I do other volunteer things in the community. I love what I do at Surprise, but I just didn't feel like I could commit another 2 hours or whatever that might be to another group. I also didn't feel like I really knew enough. Like I could have an intellectual conversation with somebody, or that my opinion or my thoughts or whatever really mattered in that setting. And so I still didn't feel comfortable, and Sarge kept asking. And so then and offered to join the Welcome Team community group. And so I made that leap. Amazing group of people that I met. A lot of growing that happened through that. With the pandemic, there's different things that have happened in each one of our lives. And so to be able to connect with each other, but then also through the messages that we heard from church, just to make it real, to make it make sense, was just so beneficial for me. I get to be friends with these people, so I feel very blessed that I have a group of friends outside of church, outside of work, whatever that might be. I have a really wonderful group of friends that I can go to if I need something, but this group is a little different in that they can call me out on some things if I'm not quite sure about messages that I'm hearing or making some decisions or feeling in certain ways. I have people that I can trust and that I'm learning and getting to know, that they're going to tell me like it is, understand, but also relate when I don't understand what the message meant really. And I didn't really understand what I was supposed to get out of it. We all are kind of like that sometimes, and there are times that I do understand the message or what I get out of it, and then maybe somebody else in the group has a question, and it's a safe place to say that, like, I don't get that, or I'm very frustrated with this message or this thought. And so that safe place to do that is an amazing thing. So I love going to the group. I don't make it every week. There's sometimes things that come up, and as with everybody, but try as much as possible because it's a connecting point for me. This was the thing that I needed to be doing. Our family was going through some rough times with a diagnosis of terminal cancer, and so I knew that was a hard time. It's going to be a hard time for our family, hard time just being there for each other, and so I needed a little bit of support from my group. So they did pray for us and for our family and for peace, but then they also, I needed them in a way that I didn't realize that I would. We were, as a family, we're planning to meet on a Sunday, and just shortly after hearing that, Grandma was not going to be fighting this cancer. We weren't intending as a family to go to church because it was going to sort of conflict with that meeting with the family, and I just knew that I needed to go because I needed to see those people in my group. I could have called them and I could have texted and would have probably gotten the same, but I knew by going there I would see those faces, and I didn't even have to talk to them. I didn't even have to hear them say anything. Just they were by me, and did that make a whole difference in my world? And sorry, I start to tear up because it was like a defining point for me, I think, that you need these people in your life, and they're there for a reason. So I wholeheartedly think it's something that if people can at least try a community group, just give it a try. It may not work, and it may not be the group of people that at that moment you need, but it just might be. And then if you take that leap, it just can turn into some amazing, amazing things.
Imagine this. With Rhonda's story in the back of your mind, the first Christians had no buildings, no budgets, and no Bibles. You might think, how can you be a church or do church without those things? Easy. The early church exploded without any of those things because they had each other. They had Jesus and they had each other. And that was more than enough because they could use whatever physical space God gave them. They didn't need budgets because they had a property that they could sell to help each other if they really had a need, or they had something that they could part with to help that person. They had a home, they had a living room, they had a city. That became their church. And they didn't have Bibles yet, but they had stories of Jesus that they talked about constantly. Listen to this scripture in Philippians chapter 2. Paul is writing to a church that he started in the city of Philippi, which is kind of a Roman military colony east of the actual Italian peninsula in the Asia Minor peninsula. But this city was like veterans who were really patriotic, and starting a church there was a little dangerous because you're kind of upsetting the fabric of the community. But this community grew and thrived because of how different and unique and special it was. Listen to what Paul writes to them. This is what he prays for. This is the goal he is hoping they achieve. He says, I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. Being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus. So what's the goal? He says there's something God's doing in you, and I just pray that he finishes it. The question is, what goal, and he's going to describe it next, what goal is Paul hoping they achieve? What's the most important thing? What's the New Year's resolution? What's that big thing he wants them to keep in front of them? What's the good work that God is doing in them that he's going to bring to completion by the time Jesus comes back? What is it? Well, let's read on. And this is my prayer, that you might accomplish as many things as possible before you die, that you'll impress God and prove to the world that you're a person worth admiring. That doesn't sound right. Actually, that's not Philippians chapter 1. That's from the made-up book of 2nd Hesitations chapter 5. Paul does not pray that they would accomplish as many things as possible before they die and impress God and prove that they're worth loving and admiring. That's not what he prays for them. That's not his main goal for them. Or how about this mock prayer? And this is my prayer for you, Philippians, that you'll arrange your life around fun, entertainment, excitement, and pleasure. And in so doing, show the world through a series of carefully filtered social media posts that your life was well lived. Doesn't seem right. That's not what Paul prayed in Philippians chapter 1 for the church. This one comes from the made-up book of 3rd Flirtations chapter 5. First and second flirtations didn't go very well, so they're trying a third time. I'm having too much fun here, I'm sorry. How about this mock prayer? From the book of Elevations chapter 1. And this is my prayer, that you'll constantly improve your physique, status, career, and finances in order to be among the elite human beings who stand proudly above all the suckers and slackers. Boy, there's a Bible verse for a coffee mug for you. But that is not what Paul prays in the book of Philippians chapter 1. Or how about finally this mock prayer from the book of Mutations chapter 4. And this is my prayer, that you'll never allow yourself to eat with, adapt to, and spiritually support people who don't mesh with your personality and lifestyle. Better to do things your own way and to stick with those who don't and won't need anything or challenge you to grow in love. Yeah, that's not what Paul prayed for the Philippians either. Okay, I have one more for you. This is from the book of Galatians. The book of Galatians, chapter 4. You know how much fun I had coming up with these names. The book of Galatians. Not a real book. These are not real books in the Bible. Just clear. I don't want you thumbing through your Bible looking for the book of Galatians. Nerd fun, pastor fun. And the book of Galatians, chapter 4, Paul says, this is my prayer, that you'd settle for relationships, habits, and religious routines that always leave you empty, so that you never take the risks associated with authentic and life-giving spiritual friendships. That's not what Paul prays either. Let's look at what he did pray. This is what he wants God to finish and complete and do. This is the goal he wants him to strive for. And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless by the day of Jesus. His prayer, his goal, is that the love would grow, that it would overflow more and more and more and more and more. How about that for a goal? What if your goal this year and for the rest of your life was to have love abound in your life? What if that was your main goal, your main agenda? And that whatever career decisions, whatever financial decisions, whatever relational decisions, whatever calendar-based scheduling priorities you set, it all is based on letting the love of Jesus thrive in your life and relationships. Wow. February 13th, we're starting a series called Is Love Dead? Because we don't believe that love is dead. We don't believe that we're past the point of learning how to love each other as humans across, whether it's political divides or racial divides or cultural divides or any other kind of religious divide. We believe that this love that Jesus talks about and that Paul prays for is more alive now than ever and available to each one of us. In fact, this love abounds if we look in the right place. If we go past setting personal goals or giving up on personal goals because we can't achieve them and set relational goals, that our faith would be enhanced and that we'd help to cheer others on as they pursue Jesus, we're going to find that love grows and abounds more and more, and that might very well be the most important goal we set. God bless you. Join us next week as we conclude this Plan to Grow series, and let us know how we can cheer you on as you set relational goals. God bless you. See you soon.